Let's see. What was it?
I love immersive sims. Titles like Deus Ex, Prey, System Shock, Thief 2, Dishonored, and Bioshock all hit the enjoyment center of my brain in just the right ways. From their do-it-your-own-way blending of gameplay mechanics to their deep-level design which allows for hours of environmental exploration. That style of game excites me more than just about any other, and in that sense, I'm a big fan of Arkane Studios. The aforementioned Prey and Dishonored were developed by them, as too was the critically raved about Minerva's Den DLC for Bioshock 2. When it comes to designing modern-day immersive sims, that studio excels. That's not to say they're perfect though, as I could levy some complaints towards their stories, more specifically Dishonored 2, which didn't narratively do much for me, and Prey, for which as amazing as it is, peaks in the story department within the first 30 minutes. But when focusing on just gameplay and exploration, I think their games are masterful. I lay all this praise at their feet because they've earned it. The abilities and weapons they put within their titles allows for a great blending of player-induced creativity, sometimes in ways I don't even think the developers planned for, but that's what makes immersive sims so great. You're given tools, an intricately developed world, and set free to solve things your way. Yet, sadly, good immersive sims are rare, which is what makes Arkane's library more than memorable. So it's beyond tragic that it's unlikely we'll see them reach the same heights as their previous games. At least not anytime soon, given the studio's going through a lot of internal conflicts. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to speak with multiple sources from within the studio. One was from their offices in Lyon, France, and the other from their Texas location. Regrettably, this occurred at a time when I was still trying to find my footing as a writer, and I published an article about my discussion on a website that in hindsight I wish I hadn't. I'll have a video in the nearest future that delves into this whole other subject, but that aside, my reporting was astoundingly solid. During our talks, I learned that the studio is going through an identity crisis, one caused by two competing cultures and the added pressure that put them under. There was the corporate pressure coming from ZeniMax that in a complete 180 from a marketing campaign just the year prior decided that single-player games are dead and that Arkane should move on to live service content. And the other source of conflict from far-left activists who'd gotten jobs at the studio and who made co-workers uncomfortable with their attempts at canceling others and constant derisions of various things. Prior to my own reporting in August 2018, it was widely reported that the studio's flagship series Dishonored was shelved for the foreseeable future. And not long before that, studio founder Rafael Colantonio had left the studio altogether. According to my sources, he left because pitches for Prey 2 and Dishonored 3 had been turned down, and presumably displeased with the direction he saw things going, he stepped away. Recent tweets from his Twitter account lend weight to that theory, but that aside, upon both games being refused the greenlight, the studio is broken into multiple teams. The first worked on Wolfenstein 2 DLC with Machine Games, and another aided with the development of Wolfenstein's Cyberpilot. The latter was at the time described by one of my sources as not great. Half a year or so after my report, and all of this was proven correct when news broke from mainstream gaming sites that Arkane was in fact working on Wolfenstein content. They even played a massive role in Wolfenstein Youngblood, the much maligned Wolfenstein spin-off. Worth adding that upon Cyberpilot's release, it was met with fairly bad reviews. Score 2 for my sources and I. Making my reporting 3 for 3 is that I was told a small team had been left aside to start work on a pitch for a brand new game. At the time of my reporting, it hadn't yet been greenlit, and while my sources refused to give me specifics, they did make sure to tell me it was being created with live service in mind, something ZeniMax was pushing for. If you haven't yet connected the dots, that's what Deathloop is. The game this video is titled after, but we'll return to this in a bit. As is to now be expected anytime I break a story, following my initial reporting, the mainstream press pulled out their pitchforks and went after me. It's not the focus of this video, so I won't dwell on it, but I was misgendered, called a bigot, and well, you know how it goes. All funny things considering my reporting was proven correct as the months and years went on. Although, unlike previous videos or my social media presence where I'm known to quote-unquote humble brag, I bring up the validity of my reporting here not to brag, believe it or not, but because it plays a big role into why I'm worried for this development studio whose games I so deeply love. I should stress that the gaming press wasn't mad at me because I broke some news about what the studio was or was not working on. They were upset because I also broke news about another entity causing problems for the studio. If you were paying attention earlier, you already know what this is. But for those who need a repeat, I am talking about far-left activists who'd infected the studio. Thanks to the likes of Dishonored creative director Harvey Smith and Anita Sarkeesian Acolyte, and a handful of others within the studio, controversial figures within the realm of gaming have gotten jobs at Arkane. One such person, for example, is Hazel Monfortin. She's a narrative designer who is known for trashing men at any opportunity she can, and that's just barely scratching the surface of how far into extreme left agitation she goes. It's this derision of entire genders that created tension within Arkane, made worse because she's not the only one like that. Other employees within the studio have blatantly said at work that the world would be better off without white men, and there's examples of others uttering other such sentiments, for which if you're just a white guy going about his job and being kind to others, this is going to strike a nerve. As one source would put it, the political tone at Arkane is dominated by what they called an SJW minority, and due to HR being on their side, my source felt that open expression of thoughtful counterpoint is essentially prohibited. Going further, my source believes engaging with the quote-unquote tolerance bullies isn't worth the career risk. These overly woke individuals have made the studio environment so toxic that multiple employees straight up told me that they don't follow certain names on social media out of fear that Hazel and co will raise a ruckus about it. As a funny aside, I'm one of the people deemed off limits. Go figure. Not helping is that some of these agitators have ties to the same game journalism clique I've previously reported on, and they know how to use their connections to give someone a bad day. So in a bid to avoid hostility and unnecessary risk to their job, my various sources refuse to follow right-leaning personalities on Twitter and such. But it doesn't just end there. Some who themselves identify as progressives won't even follow certain progressives that share their views because in some people's eyes, they don't go far enough to the left. And once again, not being far enough to the left could cause problems. For obvious reasons, all of this has created a tense and unfulfilling workplace environment. On one side, you have people who just want to make great games, and on the other, you have a contingent of folks whose extreme views are making life rough for everybody else. In the interest of fairness, it is worth adding that my sources denied that Prey and Dishonored had been too negatively affected by the far left views of those mentioned above, although it was stressed by every source that they fear for the future of the studio, especially as more employees are being hired who share the same views as those who seek to cancel people for the most minor of slights, something which is once again adding tension to an already stressful environment. With both these angles fleshed out, this is why I'm worried about the studio's future. Arkane is known for single-player immersive sims, and they're damn good at making such games. But now thanks to ZeniMax, both Arkane Austin and Arkane Lyon are being pushed to make live service experiences. For the French arm of the studio, this is taking the form of Deathloop. Now I won't deny that it has an intriguing premise. The general gist is that you take on the role of an assassin named Colt, and he has been tasked with killing 8 people spread across the island of Blackreef. The kicker though is that Colt is stuck in a time loop, and should he die or not kill his targets before midnight, time resets and he must do it all again. Adding a wrench into his plans is that he is also being hunted by another assassin, one which can be taken over by another player. This creates a tense game of cat and mouse, and on paper, it sounds neat. Judging off its gameplay trailer, it has strong Dishonored vibe, and even the live service aspect might be less of a detriment than I initially feared, because it can be played offline. I would be lying if I said it doesn't look interesting. Contrary to what some may think, I'm not here to dunk on something I've never played. Given my absolute love of the studio's previous work, I actually want to like this game. The whole idea is that it's designed for the player to die loads and loads of times, but on each attempt they're to learn something new. And according to interviews that have since come out, the world is designed as a puzzle for players to solve. Put simply, to kill all 8 targets, one must solve the world, and that sounds cool. Even its aesthetic is neat. Just reading about it and watching the teensy amount of footage they have shown, it looks right up my alley. But I can't shake my fears that it won't come together as I would hope. ZeniMax has become overbearing. Working for them has become creatively stifling for some. But perhaps even more detrimental is a toxic workplace environment that has impacted the mental well-being of those stuck in its whirlpool. It's so bad that even when not at work, game developers must now worry about co-workers and gaming press digging through who they follow, all in an attempt to see if there's something worthy of cancellation. I want that to sink in, because not only is that messed up, but in the era where the health and well-being of game developers is a hot-button issue, especially as it pertains to crunch and stuff of that sort, this is another major detriment. It is unhealthy for a person to go to work and be berated. Making it worse is that they're being talked down to because of their gender or skin color. And it doesn't matter if they're white. It doesn't matter if they're men. That stuff adds up. I mean, flip the roles. If someone said the world would be better off without black women, such a person would be sent to HR and fired within a day. and rightfully so. But it's this double standard we're seeing across the medium that is impacting those who make content for the hobby we love. I like Arkane Studios. Some phenomenally talented people work there, and they push out creative games. Prey is a top 10 game of this generation for me. I could rave about it all day. So as a fan, it breaks my heart to see how terrible they're being treated. Not just by their corporate overlords, but by those they're supposed to be sharing their creative energy with. I do hope they can overcome. I hope Deathloop is good. It sure as hell sounds neat, but I can't shake the feeling that it's going to be impacted by everything I just shared. Game development is a creative process, and it's also a complicated venture that requires focus. And as anyone who has been depressed or angry knows, creativity and focus takes a hard hit when your mind is in a bad place. And thanks to two forces who don't care about the well-being of those around them, some devs are finding themselves in the bad place. Here's hoping that just like the protagonist of Deathloop, they can find a way to break the cycle. Maybe a place to start would be by speaking up and pushing out those that make people's lives hells with their phony activism. Oh my god, we did it! Holy shit! We fucking did it! We hit the button, the door is open. Nailed it. First try. Nailed it. Hell yeah. That was totally worth it. And again, on my first try, I don't remember wasting all these rounds. I don't know how all these got in here. Yes. Okay, I'm pleased. I'm so fucking pleased. Because yeah, so what we were doing, it was bouncing off this to hit this button, because right now the door is locked. But if you hit it, oops. But if you hit it, it opens. So we got the bounce. We got the motherfucking bounce. Okay, I'm pleased. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I love these types of games. Like, there's so few games you can do something like that. And just that alone, just, oh man. I love it. We're gonna use my last recycler charge and we're gonna fuck up this office now. Oh, I just recycled myself. Whoops.